I just asked the contractor, how do I make you more efficient, which means that you can make the appropriate amount of money, but it costs us less money?
How many people just pulled over to the side of the road, turned this up?
I hope so. I mean, floor guys get screwed.